2025. The war in Ukraine has entered its fourth brutal year. What began as a grinding conflict of trenches and artillery has evolved into something far more dangerous. Russia is launching new offensives. Ukraine is fighting to adapt. And NATO, the world's most powerful military alliance, is facing the question no one wants to ask. Can it really hold the line? Russia's strategy in 2025 is different from the chaotic blitz of 2022. Moscow has shifted from shock and awe to attrition and pressure. Instead of one decisive blow, the Kremlin is testing Ukraine and NATO with multiple overlapping offensives. On the northern front, Russian forces are pushing once again toward Kharkiv, hoping to stretch Ukraine's defenses thin. In the south, missile barrages target Odessa, threatening Ukraine's last major port on the Black Sea. And across the eastern front, artillery fire pounds Donbass day and night, a grinding war of exhaustion. But the real change comes from above. Russia is deploying swarms of low-cost drones, overwhelming Ukrainian air defenses. These drones are not always precise, but in massive numbers, they can cripple power plants, supply lines, and even civilian cities. Then there's the missile war. Russia has adapted to Western sanctions, importing components through shadow networks. The result? A steady stream of long-range strikes designed not to win overnight, but to bleed Ukraine slowly. The message from Moscow is clear. Russia has the time, resources, and will to grind Ukraine down, and it dares NATO to intervene more directly. Ukraine, however, is not standing still. Years of war have hardened its defenses and transformed its military into one of the most battle-tested forces in the world. First, Ukraine has doubled down on fortification and mobility. Trench networks, underground bunkers, and rapid response brigades make it harder for Russia to capture ground quickly. Instead of static defense, Ukraine has learned to absorb the first blow and counterattack where Russia is weakest. Second, Ukraine has embraced drone warfare at scale. From $500 quadcopters to advanced NATO-supplied UAVs, Ukraine now fields tens of thousands of drones, capable of surveillance, precision strikes, and even kamikaze attacks deep into Russian territory. Each drone is cheap. Each strike is a message. Ukraine can hit back anywhere, anytime. Third, Ukraine has turned its civilian population into a backbone of resilience. Blackouts, shortages, and missile strikes are devastating. But Ukrainians have adapted with decentralized power grids, underground schools, and volunteer supply networks. For Russia, this means that breaking morale is far harder than it ever imagined. But Ukraine's greatest strength, Western support, is also its greatest vulnerability. Weapons, ammunition, and financial aid flow from NATO countries. But what happens if that support slows or fractures? This brings us to the central question. Can NATO hold the line? NATO's commitment to Ukraine has been historic. Billions in aid, thousands of advanced weapons, real-time intelligence sharing. For years, this has kept Ukraine alive. But NATO's red line has always been the same. No direct combat with Russian forces. NATO is arming Ukraine, but it is not fighting the war itself. And that's where the cracks begin to show. Inside NATO, unity is being tested. The United States faces political divisions at home. Some European countries, burdened by inflation and energy crises, are growing weary of endless aid packages. Meanwhile, Russia is betting that time will erode NATO's will faster than it erodes Moscow's firepower. Still, NATO cannot walk away. If Ukraine falls, the front line shifts to NATO's own borders, Poland, the Baltics, Romania. That's why NATO has quietly expanded its footprint. Troops, tanks, and aircraft are now permanently stationed in Eastern Europe, closer to Russia than ever before. And here lies the paradox. NATO wants to avoid a direct clash, but every reinforcement, every new deployment, brings NATO and Russia closer to exactly that. Hovering over every decision is the nuclear shadow. Russia continues to remind the world that it possesses the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth. Each time Moscow suffers a setback, state media hints at nuclear escalation. Ukraine, meanwhile, relies on NATO's nuclear umbrella, a guarantee that if Russia dares to go too far, the West can respond in kind. But what happens if Russia launches a tactical nuclear strike inside Ukraine? Would NATO respond militarily or hold back to avoid Armageddon? That question, unanswered, is the most dangerous uncertainty of all. So, can NATO hold the line? The answer may depend less on weapons and more on will. NATO has the firepower. Russia knows it cannot match the alliance head-to-head. But Russia is betting that democracies fracture, publics grow tired, and leaders hesitate. If NATO's unity holds, Ukraine has a chance not only to survive, but to eventually reclaim what it has lost. If NATO falters, Russia may not only win in Ukraine, but reset the global balance of power. Ukraine 2025 is not just about borders on a map. It is about the credibility of NATO, the survival of Ukraine, and the balance of world power. The front line runs through Kharkiv and Odessa. But the real battle is whether NATO can keep its promise to hold the line. Because if it doesn't, the next front may not be in Ukraine, but inside NATO itself.